Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving deep into something that sounds academic, but is actually a really fascinating story: university internationalization. And we're going to focus specifically on how this is all playing out in Latin America, a region that's really figuring out its place in the global world of ideas and knowledge. So let's get into it.
You know, when I say international education, this is probably the picture that pops into your head, right? Students with backpacks, hopping on a plane for a semester somewhere new, learning a language, seeing the sights. And look, that's a huge part of it. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, you really have to think again. Because underneath that postcard image, there's a much deeper, way more strategic, and honestly, a pretty intense debate going on that is literally changing what it means to be a university in Latin America.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down today. We'll start with what internationalization actually means. Then, we'll dive into 3 competing ideas that universities are wrestling with. From there, we'll look at the messy reality on the ground, the big push to build bridges within the region, and finally, we'll ask, what could a better, more fair future look like?
All right, let's kick things off with that big question. What are we really talking about when we use a buzzword like internationalization? Because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but its real meaning is way more powerful than just sending students abroad.
So here's the deal. True internationalization, according to experts like Sergio Quiroga, isn't some add-on program. It's not about having an international office tucked away in a corner. It's a deep, fundamental process that changes everything a university does, from what's taught in the classroom to the kind of research it supports, and even how the entire institution is run. It's about weaving a global and intercultural perspective into the very fabric of the university itself.
And this leads us to the heart of the conflict, really. Once a university decides it wants to go global, it hits a major fork in the road. How exactly should it do that? And believe me, there is no single answer. Instead, you've got these competing ideas, these different philosophies, pulling universities in totally different directions.
Researcher Daniela Parada puts it perfectly. She frames the whole debate as a choice. Is a university's global strategy going to be like the ancient Phoenicians, all about trade, where education is basically a product to be sold? Or is it going to be a solidarity model focused on mutual understanding and building real connections? This choice is at the absolute center of the discussion in Latin America.
So let's break these 3 models down. First up, you've got the subordinate model. Just think marketplace. The main goal here is to compete. Universities basically adopt the standards set by the big players in the US and Europe. They chase those global rankings, and they try to attract foreign students as a source of income. Next, there's the adaptive model. Think of this one as a filter. These universities engage with the world, but they're critical about it. They pick and choose the global tools that work for them while making sure to protect their own identity and local needs. And finally, you have the solidarity model. This one is the bridge. It completely rejects that market logic. The whole point is to build cooperative, fair networks, especially with other countries in the global south, based on the idea of creating knowledge together.
Okay, so those are the big ideas, the grand strategies. But what happens when these theories slam into the messy reality of running a university day to day? Let's take a look at what's actually happening on the ground.
Well, it turns out the road to going global is full of potholes. As Sergio Quiroga's research shows, universities are up against some huge obstacles. You've got endless red tape and language barriers. The funding is almost always not enough, and it's unpredictable. There's often a huge gap between what national governments say they want and what universities can actually pull off. And this is a big one. Professors who put in the extra work on international projects, they often get very little credit for it. On top of all that, you have what the source brilliantly calls mastodontico, or just mammoth-like, bureaucracies that are way too slow to keep up.
And the result of all these barriers? It's exactly what you'd expect, but it's still really concerning. A massive gap opens up between who gets to access these international opportunities and who gets left out. It basically creates a system of haves and have-nots.
And this chart just lays out the stark reality. The benefits are not being shared fairly at all. The well-funded, elite universities, usually in big cities, they have way more access to global programs. But the smaller, more remote universities often get left behind. And this dynamic doesn't just reflect the inequalities that already exist, it actually makes them worse.
But it is not all barriers and problems.
Because in the face of all these challenges, there's been a really powerful, decades-long push from within Latin America to build its own kinds of bridges, especially within the MERCOSUR trade bloc.
And this effort has really deep roots. It all started back in the 90s within MERCOSUR. You can see these key moments where the ambition just kept growing. In 92, a big plan showed there was real political will. Then, in 98, this experimental program called MEXA started testing out things like cross-border course recognition. That effort paved the way for the AUGM system, which was a huge step forward for regional quality control. And today, you have these vital networks like AUGM that are hubs for public universities to work together.
So what you end up with is this dual reality. It's a paradox. On the one hand, you have this incredibly strong commitment on paper, decades of policies, agreements, and big speeches, all pointing towards regional teamwork. The goals are there. But on the other hand, the actual structural support, the money, the administrative backup, the real coordination, it's still pretty patchy, creating this huge gap between the ambition and the reality.
So, the big question is, how does the region close that gap? How can it build a kind of internationalization that's fairer, more relevant, and actually serves the people and societies there? Well, that brings us to our final section, a possible path forward.
Okay, so based on the analysis, a pretty clear roadmap starts to take shape. First, double down on South-South cooperation. That means collaboration among nations in the global South, with fairness and real partnership as the guiding lights. Second, it's got to be about more than just moving people around. It's about baking things like intercultural skills and social purpose right into the university's DNA. Third, you have to connect international work directly to making teaching better and improving the curriculum for all students. Fourth, this all requires coordinated governance, getting governments and universities on the same page with real long-term plans. And finally, building joint research teams to tackle shared problems and create new knowledge together.
When you step back, the vision behind all this is really profound. It is about completely reframing the purpose of engaging with the world. It's about moving away from a system where education is just another product to be bought and sold, and moving toward a future where knowledge is seen and protected as a common good, something that's essential for everyone.
And that leaves us with this final question, which really captures the entire debate. As universities in Latin America keep finding their way in our globalized world, this is the fundamental choice they face. Will they simply be competitors scrambling for a piece of the global market, or will they be partners, working together to build a more cooperative, a more equitable, and a truly shared future for the region and for the world? Thanks for tuning in.